The story begins showing the mission for arresting a group of illegal immigrants who crossed the border between America and Mexico. In this case, the CIA is working with special forces for the border area, but when the immigrants gathered, a man ran away towards the ravine. When he was on the edge of the abyss, he opened his bag containing a bomb. The man then prayed for a while and then set off the bomb. As a result, the Arabian man died along with 4 security officers. Therefore, the American government immediately dispatched special forces to investigate this incident. On the other hand, a group of suspicious people entered a grocery store in Kansas City. Then suddenly, several bombs exploded in the grocery store. Just like the man who died at the edge of the abyss, the bombers also prayed before blowing themselves up and the people around them. Because the terror kept happening, James Riley, the United States Secretary of Defense, finally held a speech. He threatens the terrorists and promises to catch them as soon as possible. Meanwhile, there was the most vicious CIA agent, Matt Graver. This time, he and his forces are on a mission in the Gulf of Somalia. Their mission was to finish off a criminal group hiding in a remote place. The next day, Matt interrogated the criminal's leader named Basir. Initially, Basir did not want to admit that he had anything to do with the Yemenis who detonated the bomb in Kansas. However, Matt knew that Basir was the person who gave access to the terrorists to sail to Mexico. Then Matt asked Basir who paid him for this. Unfortunately, this man did not want to reveal anything. Because of that, Matt had to finish off Basir's sibling. Shortly, Matt finally got information from Basir. According to the Somali man, these terrorists have something to do with Carlos Reyes. At that moment, he was the most powerful cartel mafia in Mexico. Elsewhere, we are introduced to an unstable teenager named Miguel. He lives in the border area and often skips school. Every day he hangs out with his cousin Hector. But one day, Miguel is invited into a cartel, where Hector works. He is even given some money so he wants to join the organization. The scene switched showing Matt Graver, who was already in the United States. Without wasting time, he went straight to see James. At that time, he was accompanied by one of the ministry staff, Cynthia Fords. After Matt entered the room, James immediately started the meeting. According to him, Mexican drug cartels are the real terrorists. They use other terrorists to cause chaos in America. This is done so that the smuggling can run smoothly. To solve this problem, Matt has a crazy plan. He will bring the 2 biggest cartels in Mexico into conflict. Those 2 cartels are Matamoros and the cartel led by Carlos Reyes. In order for this plan to be carried out, they had to kidnap Carlos's youngest daughter, Isabel. Hearing that, everyone was stunned because this operation was too dangerous. But on the other hand, they had no choice, so James ordered Matt to play dirty. But with one condition. James asked Matt to not use American Special Forces, and this means that Matt has to recruit a mercenary army to carry out this mission. At night, Matt meets a third party named Troy to hire mercenaries and their weapons. He is also willing to pay dearly because all costs will be borne by the ministry. After that, Matt immediately flies to Bogota to meet his best friend, Alejandro, the most vicious hitman in Latin America. Matt is immediately told that this time his target is Carlos Reyes. The reason Matt asked him to join is because Carlos was also involved in the massacre of Alejandro's family. If Carlos Reyes dies, then his revenge will be paid off. To start this conflict, Alejandro decides to finish off the lawyer from the Matamoros cartel. Before killing the lawyer, Alejandro ordered him to wear his glasses so that he could see Alejandro's face clearly. After the lawyer was wearing his glasses, Alejandro shot him very viciously. As a result of this sadistic murder, the news spread quickly. While people focus on the news, Matt and his team will continue their mission to kidnap Isabel. On the other hand, Isabel is still at her school. And like her father, she grows to be an insolent girl. Almost every day she fights with her classmates. In fact, the teacher was so stressed and exhausted when Isabel causing trouble. But no matter how serious the problem was, the school would not dare to expel Isabel. Even though the victim was bleeding, she was still safe because of her father. When the school bell rang, Isabel was immediately picked up by her bodyguards. However, they did not realize that Matt Graver and his team had targeted them. Firstly, Matt turned off all the signals in the area. Then Matt blocks Isabel's car. Next, Matt and the others rushed to kidnap Isabel. They put the girl in the car, then covered her head. Meanwhile, Alejandro instigated one of Isabel's bodyguards. He pretended to be a member of the Matamoros cartel, so that the guard reported it to Carlos Reyes. Matt monitored Carlos' house. Near that place, there was a shooting incident which was allegedly the work of his men. Matt ordered the Tapper team to trace Carlos' position. While Matt was busy in the communications room, Alejandro brought Isabel to a safe house. But because Isabel still can't see his face, Alejandro ordered his men to lock the girl in a room. Then, Alejandro continues his mission pretending to be an American policeman. He worked closely with the local police force to do the mission. That way, Isabel will think that she was kidnapped by the Matamoros cartel. Not only that, Alejandro also carries out procedures like the police in general. He takes Isabel to a safe place, then interrogates her. Alejandro will continue to do this until Matt gives him the next instructions. Before continuing the mission, Matt and Alejandro ask for help from their old friend, Rafael. Here, Matt plans to move Isabel to near the Matamoros cartel's base. He wanted to make sure that the war between the two biggest cartels happened. Hearing that, Rafael was ready to help them. After the meeting, Matt was about to leave, but his car almost hit Miguel in the parking lot. At that time, Miguel locked eyes with Alejandro. Then Miguel realized that the car belonged to the American police. In the evening, Miguel went to Mexico with Hector. There he met a high-ranking Matamoros Gallo. Hector invited Miguel there so that Miguel would officially become a member of the cartel. Elsewhere, Isabel would soon be transferred to the Matamoros area. Alejandro gave a bulletproof vest to her so this girl would not be injured. When everything was ready, the transfer process was carried out. On the way, the situation seemed under control according to their plan. No other gangsters were blocking them, thanks to Rafael's help, who had agreed with the Mexican police. However, Isabel looked suspicious to Matt. Moreover, they do not stop at the border and pass along dirt roads. A few moments later, Matt and Alejandro's team were attacked by the federal police. They seem to have been paid by Carlos Reyes. Like it or not, Matt and Alejandro had to get out of the car to fight. Meanwhile, Isabel took advantage of this moment to escape. In the end, Matt's team managed to surround the assailants. It turned out that all of them were Carlos' men who deliberately hijacked the police car. So Matt didn't hesitate to finish them off. After that, Alejandro decided to look for Isabel, who ran away. Matt and his men were going to report this to headquarters. But before that, Matt gave Alejandro a tracking chip so he could help Alejandro when needed. When Alejandro was looking for Isabel, Matt was again blocked by a Mexican police car, and because he was fed up, so he didn't hesitate to shoot at them. And finally, Matt and his team managed to return to the United States. On the other hand, Isabel asked for help from someone who was crossing the deserted road, but it turned out that the person who's driving the car was her father's subordinate. But Isabel didn't want to be taken home even though she was forced to, and Alejandro immediately paralyzed the man. Then, Alejandro took the car and brought Isabel to a safe place. At this point, Isabel already knew that Alejandro was the one who kidnapped her. Then the scene moved to a military base where Matt and Cynthia were arguing. Matt was outraged because their operation was suddenly canceled by the ministry. All of this happened because Matt's team killed a Mexican policeman, and this was reported nationally, so the government had no other choice but to cancel the mission. Because they didn't want the mission to be canceled, Alejandro was still in Mexico with Isabel. And due to the hot weather, they decided to ask the residents for help. A few moments later, they met Angel, a deaf man who was really kind. Fortunately, Alejandro could communicate in sign language, so Angel thought that Alejandro was a good person. At the same time, the ministry held an emergency meeting with Matt, Cynthia, and Steve Forsing, Matt's assistant. This time, they had to arrest Isabel immediately because the girl was a witness to the shooting incident earlier. But this mission would not be led by Matt. The Ministry of Defense instead gave full control to Cynthia. Then she immediately ordered Matt and his team to look for Isabel when the tracking device was activated. But Matt seems doubtful. He doesn't want to mess up Alejandro's revenge mission. If he kills Isabel, then his best friend can never complete his revenge. Elsewhere, Isabel is eating food cooked by Angel and his wife. Meanwhile, Alejandro is suddenly contacted by Matt, telling him to kill Isabel. However, Alejandro refused because he still wanted to kill Carlos Reyes. On the other side, the Matamoros cartel secretly smuggled illegal immigrants again. But this time, they sent Miguel as a guide, and this was his first job after becoming a member of the cartel. After crossing bushes and rivers, finally the illegal immigrants arrive at their destination. From this point, they will be carried by a freight truck. At the same time, Alejandro is preparing weapons to cross the border. That's the only way to meet Carlos Reyes. While Alejandro is busy with himself, Isabel suddenly says that she knows his true identity. She also knew that her father was the mastermind of the massacre of Alejandro's family, but she would not defend her father. In the end, Isabel wants to help Alejandro, and for that, she needed to do a disguise by cutting her hair and changing her name to Karina. So without wasting any more time, Alejandro and Isabel left to the border. Besides that, Alejandro also activated the tracking chip which he put in Isabel's shoes. He did this because he was sure that Matt would help him. Shortly, Alejandro and Isabel finally arrived in illegal immigrant post. This post was mastered by the Matamoros cartel. Elsewhere, Matt and his team were preparing to go to Alejandro's place. They would use a helicopter so that they would not be detected by the Mexican police. A few moments later, Alejandro was approached by Hector, who asked for payment. Then, Alejandro handed over $1,000. Initially, Alejandro's plan worked as it planned, but everything failed because Miguel accidentally saw Alejandro's face, and he panicked because he had met Alejandro before. He immediately reported to Hector that Alejandro was a policeman. Therefore, Hector pretended to take Alejandro to the border, but when they arrived at a deserted place, Hector and his friends immediately pointed a gun at Alejandro. After that, they searched Alejandro and confiscated all of his weapons. They also took Isabel off the bus, while Alejandro tried to stay calm and chose to negotiate with Gallo. Alejandro claims to be Carlos Rey's man who wants to bring Isabel home. If he doesn't succeed, then a war between the cartels will surely break out and Matamoros could be destroyed. However, Gallo doesn't believe Alejandro's words, so he decides to beat him. Then Alejandro and Isabel are taken to a remote area. At the same time, Matt and team's location is still too far. Long story short, Gallo ordered his man, Jose, to shoot Alejandro, but he didn't dare to kill anyone, and because of that, Gallo shot Jose to death. After that, Gallo gave the gun to Miguel. The boy accepted it and shot Alejandro immediately. After being confirmed dead, Gallo and his men left Alejandro in the middle of the desert. Meanwhile, Matt was watching the murder through the tracking camera. He couldn't hold back his sadness. Matt, who was furious, finally ordered his team to finish off Gallo and all of his men, while Miguel was on his way to the cartel headquarters, chose to go down. He felt very guilty because he had killed someone. But surprisingly, Alejandro's body suddenly moved. It turned out that this hitman was not dead yet because Miguel shot him in the cheek, not his head. A few moments later, the helicopter succeeded in surrounding Gallo's group, and without wasting any time, Matt and his team immediately attacked them blindly. After slaughtering them cruelly, Matt decided not to kill Isabel because he would take her to the witness protection, even though it was not according to Cynthia's orders. When the day was getting hotter, Alejandro finally managed to untie his hands. Even though he lost a lot of blood, Alejandro is still walking strong. He stole Gallo's car and then dumped the corpse in it. When he was on the way, he was suddenly attacked by members of the Matamoros cartel. Swiftly, Alejandro threw a grenade at their car. A year later, Miguel was seen working at a food stall. At that time, he went into the kitchen, but suddenly Alejandro was standing there. Here, Alejandro already knew that Miguel wanted to be a hitman like him. Therefore, he would teach Miguel.